Welcome to Rolling Movie Recap. Today we'll enjoy an action, adventure, and sci-fi movie titled Spider-Man 3. So make sure to bring your favorite food. Sit back and enjoy. Peter Parker attends the opening night of Mary Jane Watson's new Broadway show, Manhattan Memories. Also attending is Harry Osborn, who recently found out about Peter's secret identity and has accused him of murdering his father, Norman Osborn, who was also the menacing villain, the Green Goblin. As Peter leaves the show, he sees Harry and runs up to him. He asks Harry to hear his side of the story, but Harry rejects him and leaves. Peter goes backstage and catches up with MJ before the two go to a park. Peter spins them a hammock with his spider powers, and the two lay in it, stargazing. As the couple leans in for a kiss, behind them a meteor falls nearby. Unknown to them, a strange black substance crawls out of the meteor, attaching itself to Peter's moped as he and Mary Jane leave. Meanwhile, Flint Marko, an escaped convict, climbs through his sick daughter's bedroom window and watches her sleep with machines attached to help her breathe. After a few minutes, he goes into the kitchen but is caught by his wife. He tries to tell her that he was wrongly accused for the apparent murder of a man, but Emma isn't convinced and his daughter opens her bedroom door. She hands Marko a small locket with her picture in it, and Marko promises that he will find the money to make her better again. Peter arrives at his Aunt May's apartment and tells her that he is planning to propose to Mary Jane. May tells him that he needs to put her before himself and hands him her wedding ring as a gift for Mary Jane. Driving back to his apartment, Peter is whisked off his moped by a masked figure on some sort of hoverboard. The masked figure throws Peter into a wall and then reveals himself as Harry, or the New Goblin. At the same time, Flint Marko is running from the cops through the marshlands, a fence test facility. He climbs a security fence and then falls into a concrete pit, landing on a pile of sand at the bottom. The pit is revealed to be a particle accelerator, and Flint is caught inside it as research tests are begun. When the police finally reach the accelerator, Marko is nowhere to be seen amongst the sand. Peter is told that Harry will be okay. Harry has lost his memory, and so he and Peter begin to get along just like the old days. The pile of sand in the particle accelerator stirs later that morning, and a humanoid shape rises out of the sand. It is Flint Marko, transformed into the Sandman. In Midtown, across the road from and completely unaware of the out-of-control Crane, Peter's lab partner in science, when Stacy is having a photo shoot in an office building. A giant steel girder slams through the windows behind her and then drops down another floor and smashes out the floor supports below. The corner of the building drops, and Gwen slides down to the edge of the building and hangs on with all her might. Just as she falls, Spider-Man swings in and catches her and sets her down. Spider-Man is approached by Eddie Brock, Gwen's alleged boyfriend, who tells Spidey that he is the new photographer of Spider-Man. Spider-Man swings off, annoyed with this new photographer, and then goes to the Daily Bugle to deliver the editors some photos of the Crane accident. When he arrives, it turns out that Brock has gotten there first, and Jonah Jameson chooses Brock's photo over Peter's. And Jameson tells the two photographers that if either of them wants the staff job, then they will have to get a picture of Spider-Man committing a crime. Mary Jane goes to the theater to attend a rehearsal session, but discovers that after several bad critic reviews, she has been fired from the show and replaced. The next day, Peter attends the ceremony being held for Spider-Man. He meets Mary Jane, who doesn't tell him about her being fired from the show. She encourages him, and then he walks off. When Stacy introduces Spider-Man as the person who saved her from certain death, and then Spider-Man swings in, performing small stunts on the stage. Suddenly, a cloud of sand flies in, and the ceremony is disrupted. Spider-Man swings off to find out what is going on, and sees the cloud of dust form a person who breaks into an armored car. Spidey lands in the car and tries to punch the Sandman, but his arm goes straight through his stomach. Sandman punches Spider-Man out of the vehicle, and Spidey swings back in to try and fight off the Sandman. The following night, Peter goes to a fancy French restaurant. He sits and waits for Mary Jane, practicing his proposal. As Mary Jane arrives, Gwen Stacy also approaches, and Peter introduces her to Mary Jane as his lab partner. This infuriates Mary Jane, and Gwen quickly leaves. Mary Jane asks Peter if he's trying to push her away, but leaves when he replies. The following morning, Peter tries to contact Mary Jane, but she deliberately doesn't answer the phone. As he hangs up, The phone rings and he picks it up. A detective asks him to go down to the police station, where Peter and Aunt May are informed by Captain Stacy that the police got the facts wrong surrounding Uncle Ben's death and that he was actually murdered by someone else. The cop pulls out a picture of Flint Marko, and Peter instantly recognizes him. He storms back home, waiting for any news on Sandman. As he waits, he falls asleep. Silently, the black meteoric substance approaches him, and he wakes up hanging upside down in front of a skyscraper window. His Spider-Man suit is now jet black and has enhanced his powers, making him feel really good. He swings around the city and then visits Curtis Connors, his science teacher, who agrees to analyze the black substance. Curtis warns him that the substance appears to be a symbiote, in need of a host to bind to. He warns Peter not to get any on him. Peter goes home and finally hears a report about Sandman on the police band. He puts on the black suit and goes to fight Sandman, with his powers enhanced. Rock turns up to photograph the event, but Spider-Man turns on him, ripping the camera away and smashing it. Spider-Man then goes on to fight and kill Sandman, ruthlessly drowning him and thereby transforming him into a pile of wet mud. Peter goes home, looks in the mirror and realizes that the black suit is altering his personality. MJ walks through New York, feeling lonely, and calls up Harry. She visits him, and together they make an omelet, singing and dancing to Chubby Checkers the Twist. After eating, MJ reads from a play that Harry wrote for her, and then the two kiss. Realizing that she actually doesn't feel anything for Harry, she leaves, much to the dismay of the equally lonely Harry. He suddenly has flashbacks and remembers Peter's alter ego. He sees his father in the mirror telling him to attack Peter's heart. Mary Jane arrives home and hears Peter leaving a message on her answering machine. As he finishes, she is thrown against the wall by the new goblin, who was lurking in the shadows. He tells MJ there is something she must do for him if she wants Peter to live. Mary Jane calls Peter and asks him to meet her in Central Park, where she dumps him, claiming to be in love with another man. Peter then meets Harry in a diner, where Harry claims that he is the other man. Peter furiously leaves and puts the black suit on, arriving back at Harry's apartment that night. He furiously attacks Harry. Harry throws a bomb at Peter, but Peter snags it with a web and throws it back at him. The next day, Peter strolls through the streets and sees an article about Spider-Man stealing some money from the bank, photo courtesy of Eddie Brock. He recognizes the photo as an altered version of one that he took himself years ago. He goes to the Daily Bugle and alerts James into the fraud, who fires Brock from his new position as Daily Bugle staff. As a montage, we see Peter on the phone with Dr. Connors, who tells Peter that the black substance, a symbiote, will amplify the characteristics of its host, especially aggression. Peter takes Gwen to a jazz club where MJ is now working, in an effort to make MJ jealous. He suddenly jumps up and launches into a full dance routine throughout the jazz club, ultimately resulting in Gwen realizing that he did it all to make MJ jealous. The bouncer tries to throw Peter out, but Peter starts viciously beating him up. When MJ tries to step in, he turns around and smacks her hard on the jaw, sending her flying to the ground.
Who are you?
I don't know.
Peter dons his full black Spider-Man costume and swings up to the top of a church tower, where he jumps down and begins tearing at the costume by the church bell. The bell sound seems to pain the symbiote, and it eventually comes off clean. At the same time, Eddie Brock is sitting in the church praying for God to kill Peter. He hears the bells ringing and goes to investigate, and is caught as the symbiote drips off Peter and lands on him. The symbiote changes Brock into Venom, a terrifying variation of Spider-Man with huge teeth and claws. Venom swings through the streets of Manhattan when he is suddenly stopped by Flint Marko, who mistakes him for Spider-Man. Venom tells Marko that together they can defeat Spider-Man, and Marko agrees to team up. Venom gets a taxicab, then drives up to MJ house and collects her when she flags him down to get to the jazz club. He kidnaps her and hangs her high in the taxicab in a web. Peter sees reports of the kidnapping on the news, and then changes into his Spider-Man costume. He goes to Harry's apartment and asks for help, but Harry rejects him again and turns to show Peter the scar on his face. Peter leaves, and Harry is confronted by the house butler, Bernard, who tells Harry that he cleaned his father's wound the night he died. He tells Harry that the blade that pierced his father's body came from his own glider. Spider-Man swings into the construction site and lands on the front of the car. Venom swings in and knocks him through the windshield. He lands down on the web, and then Venom jumps on him. Peter and Venom topple out of the web and have a midair fight before Peter hits the ground. He is then tripped up as Sandman appears, more than 10 times his normal size and growling like a monster. Sandman pummels him with his gigantic fist. Just before Sandman can finish Spider-Man off, Harry flies in and throws a bomb at Sandman and helps Peter up. The two fight Sandman and Venom, and Harry eventually knocks Sandman down while Peter gets MJ out of the taxi and into a safer area. Peter circles Venom with the bars, and the clanging sound pains Venom. Peter snags Eddie from inside the suit with his webbing and pulls him out. He then throws a bomb from Harry's glider at the symbiote, and he rushes towards the symbiote while the bomb flies through the air. Sandman approaches Peter and tells him that the killing of Uncle Ben was in fact an accident caused by his gun going off. Peter forgives him and Sandman flies off through the buildings while Peter swings down to Harry. He and MJ sit on either side of him, comforting him while he dies. Harry forgives Peter for the death of his father and then dies as the sun rises. And this is the end. See you in another recap.